I'm Steve Combs, and this is the News Guardian Report.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining in. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that we discussed in one of our earlier podcasts, which is how to fix the educational system. And we just want to remind you to hit the like and subscribe buttons. We appreciate your support and viewership, and we look forward to having you on future podcasts with us. Steve, take it away.
Hey, thanks. I've thought of three things that I would do if I could be in charge of a high school somewhere. Number one is to get back to neighborhood schools.
Now, was that ever a thing?
Oh, yes, it was when I was a kid. Now, this was back in the 50s and 60s. I walked to school and came home for lunch. And I remember having plenty of time for lunch. You know, these schools now, they first of all, they eat lunch at 10 in the morning sometimes. Because they eat in shifts.
Yeah.
And so they start like at 10 or 10:30. I would come home at a regular time. My mother would be there because she didn't work outside the house. And have lunch and then go back.
Okay.
And there were mothers who worked, but somehow everybody ate lunch.
Interesting.
And that was the way in elementary school, middle school, and high school. If you look, think of it this. If you could get back to neighborhood schools, you could get rid of most of your school buses, and that is an enormous cost for school systems.
Cost and inconvenience. It congests traffic.
My grandson doesn't now, but used to spend an hour on the school bus every day, and it was just around the other side of the mountain where they live in Alabama. That was one way. And the parking lots, the huge parking lots. Think about that.
Oh, yeah.
Of the cost. Also the bureaucracy. You would not need as many administrators. You have a principal and maybe a guidance counselor or somebody like that, and everybody else is a classroom teacher. In fact, if the school is small enough, that principal could probably even teach a class. Or, you know what I mean?
They should.
But you wouldn't have all these bureaucrats. I taught at a large urban high school once as a substitute, but I was there all the time, or a lot of the time. And there were five assistant principals.
Wow.
And making $90,000 a year. And this was almost 20 years ago.
Wow.
So it's huge. And then you have police, and you have all this other kind of stuff.
It's a lot of taxpayer dollars.
It's a lot of money you could save. I don't know how much. That's something that needs to be studied. The second thing I would do is I would not chop classes up into structured classes. Subjects is what I mean.
Yeah.
If I were teaching social studies, for example, I would have economics, civics, and history all one class.
Those are complementary topics.
They all go together.
Yeah.
You cannot really, if you're teaching U.S. history, you cannot really teach any of those subjects without it being part of the other. It would be a year-long thing, and it makes more sense. It makes more logical sense, because look what happens now. Students go to school at an ungodly hour sometimes in the morning because of the school bus schedule.
That's how I felt.
Those school buses have to go pick up the middle school kids and the grade school kids. And so the kids show up at 7:15 or 7:20 in the morning. They go to homeroom. They go through all that kind of business and announcement and that kind of stuff. Then they go off to class. And so they go to English class. At the end of English class, they go to biology, and they've got 6 minutes to get there. And in a large school like where I taught, we had 8 buildings, and it was not uncommon to have a class in building 1 and then the next class in building 8, and you had 6 minutes to get there. And kids are trying to go to the bathroom, trying to go to their lockers, check their Facebook page to see how popular they are, and they've got 6 minutes, and all this time they have to turn off their first period brain and turn on their second period brain, whatever that is. And so you're going from English to chemistry to band practice to history to whatever. That doesn't make any sense at all.
Nope, not at all.
And so I think that would really be smart to do that. But to do that, you really have to be able to think creatively and not stay boxed in by the traditional method that the bureaucracy wants to keep. They want to keep it that way because it's always been that way, and that's the way we do it. We go period 1, period 2, period 3.
Yep.
And it doesn't make any sense. Also, I would, for the most part, get rid of textbooks.
Oh, wow. Talk to me about that.
Would you really want to go back and study U.S. history again by reading a textbook that some committee has written and that's been approved by some committee?
No.
That's bland, that has all the color boiled out of it so that you don't offend anybody.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Let me tell you a story.
It's ridiculous.
When Jefferson took office in 1801, he rode up to Washington on his horse from Virginia and stayed in a boarding house the night before. I heard this during the inaugural parade of Bush 43. The announcers were talking about this. I never had known this. He stayed in a boarding house. The next day, he was inaugurated as president, and he wasn't ready to move into the White House because Adams hadn't moved out. And so he went back to the boarding house where he was staying, walked by himself, and the people who were staying at the boarding house had already sat down to eat, and there were no places left.
Oh, wow.
And so he went into the kitchen and fixed himself a plate and took it up to his room. This is the President of the United States, all right? Now, if I'd been told stories like that when I was in high school, I think I might have kind of gotten interested in history
it's
because
intriguing.
now you're talking about real people.
In real situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When Monroe was president, he hadn't seen much of the country. He was our 5th president. He went out on his own and toured around the country. He had a secretary who was a brigadier general, paid his own way, hitched rides, stayed with friends, and one of the rides he got was with the postal service, the Pony Express or whatever it was then. And when he got back to Washington, he got a bill. They sent him a bill for $1,532. I'll never forget the amount. And he paid it out of his own pocket.
Good for him.
So these are great stories. And then look at the documents, the Declaration of Independence earlier. Start with the Magna Carta. Read that. The Federalist Papers, the Constitution, great speeches. I have this book here called The Annals of America. And it's a 20-volume set that I bought at the library for $15, I think used. And it's done by the decade, and it has important speeches from those decades. You could take something like this and use this as your documents. Here is a speech by John Marshall, who was Chief Justice, on Marbury versus Madison, famous Supreme Court case. That is so much better than wading through these awful textbooks that go through the Emancipation Proclamation, Manifest Destiny, all this kind of nonsense. So that's what I would do.
Interesting.
And I would throw in economics and civics and how our government works. All that stuff would be part of it. You might team teach it.
Yeah. All those tiebacks really reinforce the subject.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's important. All right. So is that all we got?
No, there's one more thing.
Okay, one more thing.
And then the final thing that I would do is I would have free market salary. What am I trying to say? I would hire teachers in the open market, and I would pay them. What I would do is I would give the principal so much money and say, okay, you got this much money to spend on teachers. You spend it however you want. All right. So what that teacher is going to do, or what that principal is going to do, he's going to go out and find gym teachers who are probably college students or parent volunteers or somebody you don't have to pay much money to. And then he's not going to pay the English and history teachers very much. I hate to say this because I teach
you're one
English.
of them.
But they're plentiful. Lots of people want to do it. I'm not saying they're all good, but you have a wide
pool. You have a pool to pick from.
But it's tougher to find math teachers and physics teachers, other science teachers. And to get good people, you're going to have to pay them more. Now, the drawback here is that the teachers' unions would fight this tooth and toenail. I mean, they would go to war over that.
Oh, yeah.
But if you could do that, you could get really good people. And you pay no attention to teacher certification. That's nonsense. That's just a union ticket. That's all that is. And it doesn't make better teachers. College professors or retired people who would love to teach at that level can't because they don't have the certificate, and they're not about to go back to school and take these courses. It would be a waste of their time. So
Of course.
that's how we would do it at Combs High.
That's a good name. All right. Well, thanks for that insightful bit of information. Thanks again, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, and I'm Steve Combs. This is the News Guardian Report.